if I did like a channel that had underground film screening at midnight, kind of like TCM we used to do before they cut it. Shame on you, TCM. But like underground films, this would have been a candidate. I would definitely have shown it. I think it's the right ingredient for this kind of movie, and I'll get a little more detail why.
Yeah, I've got a letterbox list of like movies I wanted to cover. And this thing has been sitting on there for a long time. Okay. So,
all right. And also, the Tyson, I actually snuck into the theater to see this for a little bit. So, it's kind of like a little soft nostalgia piece for me. But we're going to talk about Carl Weathers trying to headline a movie for the first time, not being a side boy in a movie like Rocky and Predator, the side chick. He's going to headline it, and it's Action Jackson.
welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoFilmReviews.com.
Hi, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. Another way you can support the show, hit the like and subscribe button right down in there. Tell your friends about the show, too. It's a little thing that you can do, but it's a big thing for us. And, of course, another way you can do is the Patreon.
Yeah. Sign up now. Tiers as low as $1, but at $5 you get on our rotating Patreon pick group. Like Tyler Paul, for example, who picked Starship Troopers for us last time. So
we're on social media. We're on X and on Instagram. Both Kai and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out that webpage for our final awards of 2023. I think they're still posted.
Yep. Hashtag Barbie deserved better.
But today we're talking about a staple of, I think since Carl Weathers passed away, a lot of people are talking about The Mandalorian or Happy Gilmore or Rocky, and I think let's talk about this one, the one that she actually is the star of it. It is Action Jackson. What the hell's going on?
So Jericho Jackson is a tough Detroit cop with a chip on his shoulder after a demotion. When he becomes aware of a plot to assassinate and frame people caused by dirty businessman Peter Delaplane, it's Action Jackson on the case.
Okay, so if you love the 80s action movies, I'm going to tell you who's in the movie. You have Carl Weathers. You have Craig T. Nelson as the bad guy. Vanity. I'll get a little more back to Vanity. She was a hit star. And she actually dated Prince. And at the time of this, she was dating Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue when this film was being made. Thomas F. Wilson. We all know from him.
I guess a pre-franchise Biff.
Before Part 2 came out. Sharon Stone makes an appearance in this. Bill Duke. Who doesn't want another Bill Duke, Carl Weathers kind of scenes outside of Predator?
Yeah, you get that carryover with Sonny Landham as well. So
it keeps going. You got Ed or Ross as the bad guy at the beginning of the movie. You'll see a lot more of him later in his career. Robert Daviv, and then you have one of the best, and before he became famous was Al Leon.
Yeah, I mean this was.
You don't know Al Leon hit the long thing here, yeah.
But like kind of just like as he was hitting onto it, man, he should have just had a cinematic universe where he was just kept almost dying and then surviving in every film. I think he's the same character. So,
right, yeah, and you'll recognize his face, Al Leon. Martial arts and everything. But how did he get in this movie? Well, the director of this movie is the first time he ever did his first full feature is Craig R. Bexley.
Yeah. So Stephen King fans will know Craig because he did a ton of Stephen King miniseries adaptations in the 90s.
Thanks
he
for
did
bringing
Rose
it up.
Red, Storm of the Century.
Yeah.
He did the prequel to Rose Red, which was very unseen, called The Diary of Ellen Rimbauer. He did a ton of stuff. In fact, he directed the entire 13-episode series Kingdom Hospital.
Yeah,
it was a very underground hit for King.
It should get a lot more recognizable. Kingdom Hospital just didn't get...
Yeah, that show got shoveled away. Like
That's
Craig
too
R.
bad.
Baxley never got the credit he deserved as a King director.
Started out doing stunts for a lot of TV shows and movies, and then became a second unit director for TV shows like Dukes of Hazzard, The A-Team. Actually did second unit for Predator, and I'm sure the conversation was, hey, Carl, I'm doing a movie. You should be in this. Hey, Bill Duke, when we're doing Predator, let's get you out of the woods, and we'll get you in the TV, in the city environment. So I think Craig R. Baxley was already working on some way to formulate a script to get some stunts involved. Obviously, stunts are being big part of this reason to get this movie.
Yeah, but this is all, I mean, this in a lot of ways is Carl Weathers' baby, because, I mean, even on the set of Predator, when he was talking to Joel Silver, they were both sharing their love for blaxploitation films of the 70s, and so knowing that going into the film and watching it, I was like, you know what, that is really something that's quite prevalent throughout the narrative. And he was told, basically, come up with an idea and we'll do something together. So he created the name Action Jackson, and then kind of like formulated what the general idea of the story would be before passing it off to screenwriter Robert Renault, who you guys might know from writing Demolition Man, but he also wrote the first episode ever of Tales from the Crypt. He didn't write a single other episode, but he wrote the first one.
Okay. Very interesting to know. You see a lot of similarities of script story developed with Demolition Man in this movie as well. So it's high octane, explosive, late 80s action. I mean, to get a guy on fire goes off the building.
Yeah.
This is actually a little Die Hard. There's a little peppering of kind of the aesthetic of what would happen to be Die Hard a year after this, or a couple months after this.
Well, the film feels so much like so many other films, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but it really feels like a nexus point for that kind of like late 80s action period, because you mentioned Die Hard. 6 of the performers from this film are in Die Hard. You know, and Joel Silver, of course, was kind of involved with that as well. You've also got the score, which is done by Herbie Hancock and Michael Kamen. Who has it has a lot of Lethal Weaponisms to it. It feels very Lethal Weapon-esque, and so it kind of feels like the nexus point of a lot of these kinds of action films.
So stunts, action, not so much story, but I think they get the story a little bit right. There's a little bit of offbeats to this, which kind of makes it a charm for an underground movie. It's definitely a flawed film. It tries to jumble a little bit of slapstick comedy into this, and then almost jumps into action. Then it becomes a romance movie. And then you get this kind of very 80s showdown afterwards with martial arts and everything.
Yeah.
So it has different beat changes, where I'm sure will probably be a little bit salty. For me, it's kind of the charm of it. I don't know, what do you think?
Well, I think the absolute worst part of the film is the story. Like, and I don't mean that as too much a bad thing. I do recommend the film, but the worst part is the story, because it's a very derivative, and
so
yet
wonky.
It's kind of all over the place.
Right.
And I think the worst part of the film is the tone, because it's not like a great directing job from Bax. This is his first film, but what he does well is when he does hit that perfect tone and style to it. Like the scene where Action jumps over the car that's driving under him is so ludicrous and silly, and
don't shoot me, try to run me over the car.
So it's a dumb thing, but like in the sense of the film, he feels superhero-esque, he feels blaxploitation-y, he feels like the Action Jackson that Carl Weathers envisioned in that scene. It's not always, but when it hits that kind of silly, stupid, likable fun, it's really working.
What usually happens with stuff like this in action films, and it happens a lot with Lethal Weapon and using other sources, is with heroes consumed with work, they don't have a time for love, and they have to find a connection to love. You have also the opposite. Some people who are infatuated with the love don't pay attention to the work. And Howard Super likes to talk about it, the balance of work and a relationship. And here is Action Jackson. Of course, he loves his job, beating up bad guys and being the action, and fumbles with the love component. They know they need it in there, but it doesn't come in till like an hour in. We don't even see Vanity until like an hour of the movie.
Yeah, it's an odd choice, because you're not really sure who our lead female character is.
He has more scenes with Sharon Stone before he has with Vanity.
She's so prevalent in the film, and I was kind of wondering, I was like, Vanity's in this more, right? Like, they didn't just bring her in for a nude scene and then throw her to the curb. It's one of those cases of, with the story and with the moving around between these elements and the confusion around the characters, there's elements of, like his wife left him, so he got married to the job. There's all those cop tropes of like, the captain's gonna have my ass today. I've been demoted. I'm at a desk.
I love those 80s, the captain shouting at the guy, "You're rude, you're making my job harder, stop blowing stuff up."
Yeah, and that's where Bill Duke is at his best. It is funny though, because every time Bill Duke is like coming out of his office, I just keep getting caught on his character name, which is Captain Armbruster. Every time I see that door, it's just like, wait, pause the film real quick. I gotta have a minute with his name.
I think a lot of people understand what they were going for. I think there's a little bit after it takes a week into the camera, like, we're having fun doing this. I think they're trying to make this a little more of a camp than the serious tones like a Lethal Weapon that became a little more of a comedy.
Yeah, the comedy came out of the characters there,
But the other thing is, what really worked with Lethal Weapon was the heartache. I think Richard Donner works well with heartache. here you don't get that as much. I think you need something of a little more heartache with Action Jackson other than a superficial superhero with a badge.
Yeah.
Almost, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And in that way, like, I feel like, yeah, the super heroics parts is, again, fitting with that tone. It's fitting with that silliness. Because, again, when you are in that nexus point and you are surrounded by all of these really great, super serious kind of films, because even Die Hard, there's some comedy to Die Hard, but it is a very dark and serious film.
Right. If you really analyze that, the peppered comedy lightens up. If you really think about it, it's dark. Right?
Yeah, and I think this film embracing the ludicrous nature of everything. I honestly feel like today they would have embraced it even more if the film were made now. You know, in the advent of like the incredibly sillier versions of like Fast and the Furious, or even if you've seen the recent film The Beekeeper, it's an absolutely stupid film with a stupid mythology that is at times brilliant. So, you know, you kind of have that juggling act.
Right, and I think I'm going to say it. I think it's time for a redo. I really do. I have a different, maybe it's different tone to it. But right, I don't know how would you want to do this, but I do like the charm of how wonky it is.
Yeah, it's a shame they didn't go back to this property when we had Carl Weathers still with us, because I was thinking as I was watching it this time that it feels almost like, you know how they did the Shaft with Sam Jackson in the early 2000s, where he's not actually playing Richard Roundtree's character, he's playing his nephew. And then they brought all of them back for another Shaft film like 5 years ago. It's like, you could have done that with Action Jackson having like a son or a nephew also named Action, and you could have kind of had that same kind of buddy cop mentality. It's too bad we never got to do that.
Has a little bit of charm if you like the late 80s nostalgia piece of all the kind of character actors that are peppered throughout this movie. And of course you have a really hard, over-the-top, exaggerated bad guy, perfectly cast. Craig T. Nelson's perfectly cast in it. I have to say, casting was perfect into it. Story's kind of clunk. The stunts are fun, but it's it's a very good popcorn underground flick to watch after midnight with the rest of your cult followers. Yeah,
you mentioned Craig T. Nelson. I grew up on Craig T. Nelson as a Minnesotan, as all of us do, on Coach. Yeah. Like, it's what I was part of. I watched it all the time. But I've always preferred him as a bad guy, and maybe it's because of my time watching Coach and getting used to him as a good guy. I like when he's kind of an asshole or kind of a monster.
Turner Hooch, he does it perfect, right?
Yeah, and I think about him in The Devil's Advocate all the time, where I think he just absolutely owned being almost as sinister as Al Pacino, which is not, a really easy thing to do. But I also want to point out, too, what works really well for Action as a character is that Carl Weathers does imbue him with fun, and the casting, as you pointed out, is great. There's the bodyguard character, there's the driver, there's all these people that are smaller characters in the film that kind of like join up with the narrative. Right. You don't get to spend enough time with them. The guy that runs the hotel that was a former I think heavyweight boxer.
Yeah. Or the other guy who was actually
those guys.
Yeah, the limo driver that was in Die Hard.
Yeah,
he was in there.
So too. I like that they kind of kept bringing these characters back in. I feel like they were building a nice cast of characters for a franchise where we could have seen any number of these guys show up again in the sequel, and I would have been, oh, thank God, it's so and so.
Yeah. So I will label it like an underground cult classic kind of a film. It definitely has some flaws, but it has some charms to watch it to kind of like a late night kind of a thrill thing. So
considering this as a 19% on Rotten Tomatoes, I think that's shocking to me because I don't think the film is definitely flawed. I don't think it's a bad movie though.
No, it's not a bad movie.
And it's again so silly, so kind of dumb at times that it's entertaining. And I think entertainment is the most important value here.
Yeah. What do you think of our review of Action Jackson? Put a comment down below.
Yeah, what would you do with the sequel? Let us know. Or maybe do you feel like there should have been a sequel like Dangerous Passions from 1990, which was released in Germany as Action Jackson 2? Or his other film, Hurricane Smith, which feels like they could have just changed
the name. How did you dig that
okay.
crap up? The stuff he finds.
Let us know down in the comments section below.
Yeah,
and
please
thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. You can check out all of my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
You can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts. New episodes will be coming up in the next couple weeks.